Cam Shepard played at Randolph. He also spent time coaching at Jefferson Forest, coaching at his alma mater, Randolph, and coaching at Brookville High School. Coach Shepard, heading to Douglas Freeman, talks about his playing days at William Byrd, his playing days at Randolph, and talks about some coaching memories as well, right here on the Sports Buffet podcast. You were a good player. You played on the high school level. You played on the college level. When did you know you wanted to become a coach?
To be honest with you, I think I knew I wanted to be a coach in high school at a pretty early age. I knew my job had to involve basketball at some way. I wasn't at that point. I was young and I didn't understand all the ways that I could involve my career with basketball.
But there have even been more ways now because skill developers are out there now. Travel circuits out there now to where those maybe weren't options when you were a youngster.
Sure. So I tell people this a lot. I was very blessed to play for great coaching staffs in high school and college. I think in high school, I watched the coaching staff that I played for be really close knit. I watched them, they hung out outside of coaching. Their wives were friends. It was a very close knit group. And then I got to college and I got to play under what I believe is one of the best coaches I've ever seen in Clay Nunley. His passion and his excitement for the game, but also his ability to teach the game at such a high level was something I wanted to, be a part of. I wanted to learn the game the way he knew it. I'll never know the game at the level he knows it and won't be able to even come close to teaching it as great as he does. But I think he was a huge influence on me wanting basketball to be my job.
Before we go the college route, are we looking at Kevin Tuck in the high school realm, or was it before Tuck?
I played for David Colasurto.
Okay.
Kevin Tuck was the head assistant, and Jamie Edwards was on staff as well. And, those three guys specifically had a huge impact on me, all three. Still talk to them regularly. They come watch games when they get a chance, and they all three in different ways had a profound effect on me becoming a coach.
You talked about, you saw how they interacted as it's three people, but they're acting as one type of thing with the cohesive unit. Kind of break that down a little bit more. What specifically did you see out of Colasurto, Tuck, and Edwards that made that so special?
So the last few years, Colasurto and Tuck's relationship, especially on the sideline, has reminded me a lot of mine and Tyler Goodman's. I watched Coach C, as we called him, rely on Kevin for, certain things within game. He felt very comfortable with him. He felt like that if Kevin was giving some sort of advice or was trying to tell him to do something, that it was something he needed to listen to. He trusted him. That's how it felt with Tyler. But on the same note, there are times as a head coach where you feel strongly about something that's happening. You want to stick with it. And I never watched Kevin get, saddened by the fact that his advice wasn't taken or feelings hurt or anything like that. He was just confident in himself. And, okay, well, I'm going to go to the next possession. And if I have something to tell you then, I'm going to tell you something else. And Tyler's the exact same way. He has confidence in himself. He did a great job for me in that fashion and in a lot of ways, but it reminded me a lot of our relationship. And then Jamie Edwards was the JV head coach when I was going through, and he was just fantastic at skill development. He was teaching the game and breaking it down and making sure that those guys were really, really ready to take the next step to the varsity level. And to me, your head JV coach has to be a fantastic coach. Like, if you don't have a skill developer, if you don't have a guy that can teach the younger guys what you want them to know at the varsity level, they're going to be behind when you get them.
Your JV coach probably needs to be the best teacher of the group, because if you've got to reteach when they get up to varsity, what's he there for?
Yep, that's exactly right. And at Brookville, I've been blessed. I've had some really, really good JV coaches. Dylan O'Newfer was the JV coach for me for a couple years, and we moved him up to the varsity staff. And then last year I had JV Vander Mortal, first year coach. They both did a great job and with developing and getting guys ready for the next level.
And even if it's somebody that doesn't know basketball as well, if you can get that JV coach relational, to where they can get the kids to want to keep coming to basketball practice or want to keep basketball as a option in their future. I'm assuming that's also just as much as if they know, the 2-3 zone.
Right. I think they should already have a love for the game and a passion for the game, but making sure that that doesn't burn out
Right.
and making sure that it continues and maybe even grows, like they get super excited to be a varsity player one day. I think that's a huge part of that job.
Why is Clay Nunley so smart?
Well, I think you can watch anytime his team plays. I think the preparation level is so high with his teams. I think they're ready. They're, it's having gone through it, I could tell you the whole process. It would take a while, but, practices are, you're simulating the other team in a way that I had never seen before.
Did you learn prep from him?
Yeah, I learned it in many ways from many different people.
Right.
Coach C was great at scouting and did a lot of film work, and he was really, really good at that. And then I saw it on a much deeper, much more detailed level at the college level with Coach Nunley, to where when we were going into games, I felt like I knew everything about the other team personnel-wise, their sets, their OB plays, things like that. And I always felt like we were completely and utterly prepared for anybody we played. And I think if you watch his teams play, that shows every night.
I remember when he was coaching at Randolph, which is where you went. I want to say it was probably after you. It might have been when you were there. They were playing Virginia Wesleyan in the ODAC final. From A to B, I could argue that's not a game where you really are going to compete with Randolph's athletes versus Virginia Wesleyan athletes. Not a knock on Randolph at all, but just got a different crowd of athletes.
Sure, absolutely.
Super close game, if I remember correctly. Honestly, I could argue Randolph shouldn't be in the finals with what they have, but they have Nunley, which seems like that's worth a good 4 to 6 points.
I think, he's a guy that I can speak from experience. He made me play at a different level. One, he just garners your respect immediately. There's something about him. You want to do well for him. You want his respect, things like that. But little nuances about the game that he taught made me better instantly. Very small things that I never knew I needed to adjust with my game that he would show me.
Such as?
I guess you would have labeled me as a shooter. If there was a label to put on me as a player, I probably wasn't good enough to have a label, but shooter, I guess, would be the one. And, I was always a guy that kind of hopped into my jump shot, and he pushed us to have our foot slightly back. So the second it hit our hands, we're momentum stepping into our shot. Caused me to get my shot off faster. I think there was way more consistency because with the hop, there's an opportunity for your feet to be messed up or something like that. But with the step that he was showing us with the power leg, it made my jump shot way more consistent. And that's just one of a million things he showed us.
Motivator?
An incredible motivator, and I think, like I said, it goes back to the respect level. He didn't have to give a rah-rah speech, even though he was good at that. He didn't have to give those kind of speeches because you were ready to go. The second you got off the bus, you wanted to win.
Seemed like from my dealings with Nunley, he has, I don't want to say softened, but softened a little bit over the years. Do you feel like that's something he kind of also taught you? Because I've known you from your early days at Jefferson Forest. You're a different guy than you are now. I could argue it's because you have kids, but how much does Clay Nunley play into that in terms of the way he kind of, from year 1 to year 7 was different with him? I'll put it that way.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's just changing with the times and adapting, right? I think, he had a group that went through from when I graduated, in 2011, that he knew he could coach that way, and I think he saw we thrived on that. We were built for that type of coaching. And I think he's excellent at seeing what kind of guys he has. I would argue that I don't think he coaches every single guy the exact same, because I think he's really good at seeing, okay, well, this guy might need this level of, external motivation. This guy I might not have to say a word to this guy. He may mess up and he's already ready to fix it. I think he learns that about his players really well and really effectively. For me, I think it's just picking out what really, really matters now. I think as a young coach, I wanted every I dotted and every T crossed, and I wanted every single call to go the right way, and I wanted every single set to work perfectly and end up in a layup or a made three. And, I had to change my mindset a little bit and understand, like, there are so many imperfections already in basketball, but when you throw in that you're working with teenagers whose minds aren't fully developed yet, who have a million things going on in their head that happened that day, I had to understand it's not going to go exactly how you planned.
What'd you learn from coaching at the college level with Pete Hamilton for the year you did?
Well, Pete's one of the best offensive minds I've been around as far as coaching goes. He had so much good stuff on offense that he probably doesn't even realize I stole a lot from him and tried to implement it as much as I could.
Better coach and he'll get credit for?
Pete's a fantastic coach. It's like you've said, it's tough at Randolph. It's not easy. There are some disadvantages you start out with from the very get-go, right, compared to some of the other schools in the conference. And I thought Pete was as good as anybody while he was coaching at giving his guys a fighting chance. With Pete, it's a lot like Coach Nunley. I knew the guys were going to be ready when I watched, and I knew they were going to do some really good, innovative stuff on offense. But Pete was also a guy that, and I watched it for a year when I coached with him. A lot of those guys, and the same with Coach Nunley, they came to Randolph to play for him. The recruiting part was, I want to play for Coach Hamilton. I want to play for Coach Nunley. Randolph's a great place. I got a great education. I'm really proud of my time there. But I came there to play basketball for Clay Nunley.
And that seems to be a commonplace in college of, I'm going to play for the guy rather than the school sometimes.
Yep.
And then I've always heard people say pre-portal, I want to transfer because so-and-so left to go to another place. I committed to him more than I committed to the place.
Yeah, I watched many kids, get really excited about what Pete was trying to do and his goals and his mindset. And, Pete was another really, really good motivator. So as much as I stole from anybody, I stole a lot of things coaching-wise from Pete as well.
So the biggest thing you learned from that year on a college that helped you on the college bench?
I think, organization in every way. Pete was really good about having bench coaches track things, and we would go back and assess it at halftime, and then we'd go back, assess it at the end of the game, and, it would help us adjust lineups for the next game. It would help us make sure that these 5 guys might be playing together in crunch time because, if we looked at these 15 possessions, they were the most effective 5 together, things like that. I just think the details and the organization, I got to see it up close. I saw it as a player with Coach Nunley, but some of that goes over your head, right, and that you miss some of that.
You're a player.
Right. When I was with Pete, I got, a front row seat to watch somebody be extremely organized.
Did it make you scout differently from when you took over a head coaching job here at Brookville?
I don't know that it made me scout differently. I think it added to some things that I did scouting wise. I think I kind of took Coach Nunley's style and his way of scouting, a little bit of Pete's style, and I kind of molded it together. And I think that's important as a coach to look like these people are really good at this. Maybe try and do what they do, emulate what they do. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. And with me, there's no ego involved. I want to win. So if I'm watching 2 people do this at a high level and do it well, I'm going to try and do it the way they do it.
I never had a bad relationship with Clay Nunley, but I feel like knowing you and knowing Coach Hamilton's kind of got me in the door a little bit more. And when I interviewed him at the ODAC tournament, I think it was this past year, when he talked about the teams that didn't win the ODAC tournament that he coached, I would not have ever pictured Clay Nunley having that much emotion in an interview. And he really felt like he let people down.
Yeah, he's never let anybody down. I was at the game when they won it this year, and I just tried to get a quick hug with him after the game, and all he did was whisper in my ear and said, "I wish you would have gotten one of these." And I think that speaks to his character, right, and I think that speaks to the level of human being that he is. Because if I remember correctly, in your interview with him, he named in order every team that got to the finals that didn't win it. First of all, to be able to just do that offhand in that kind of emotional state is impressive. But what that tells you is he thinks about those teams often.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for a group of people that he's only going to necessarily be responsible for 4 years, to mean that much to him, that he thinks about him that often, like I said, I think it just speaks to who he is.
A lot of good players, a lot of good coaches in the league since he's coached.
Yeah.
A lot of good players and a lot of good teams. So, I mean, it wasn't going to be – I don't think it's ever easy for anybody to win a tournament in, 4 days.
Right.
You got to beat 3 good teams.
Yep.
How tough is it to coach in back-to-backs?
I think the whole tournament setting with the ODAC is really, really hard. I don't think people understand how difficult it is to win an ODAC tournament. In the ODAC, a lot of times, especially in the semifinals and finals, you're probably beating somebody that spent time in the top 25 for most of the season, and you're probably going up against somebody that even if they lose, they may get in that large bid.
Right.
They may be that good. So you're beating high-level coaches, high-level teams, and to have to do it, in back-to-back settings when you're hurt and you've been through the grind of a 25-game regular season, it's tough. But, again, I think it speaks to Coach Nunley's preparation and his ability to break things down and focus on what matters, take certain things away, because you remember, that game against Macon this year was a war.
Right.
Went back and forth, and, I think – if you watched Coach Nunley's kids, they wanted that one for him really bad.
But for you on the high school level, you've got a game Wednesday and then you've got a game Thursday. I know most coaches want to probably have a day of practice. Most
Sure.
kids probably don't.
Sure.
How tough is it to go Wednesday, Thursday for you?
It's hard for me because, you've known me for a long time. I'm a film junkie with scouting and things like that, and I want to feel prepared because I feel like it's my job to put them in the best possible scenario to succeed. And I think sometimes when you're short-handed on time, it makes that difficult. But what I found is a lot of times in those scenarios, if I just focus on my team and focus on what we do well and try and impose our will as a little more than knowing exactly what the other team's going to do, it's been more successful. The kids would rather never practice. They would rather go straight back-to-backs. They would play,
40 games in 40 days.
Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday every week if they
Right.
could. But that's not so enjoyable as a coach.
When the book is finished on Cam Shepard, the coach, what do you want it to say?
Hopefully, there's a back page where people can sign, and there's a lot of former players willing to come write a note or write their name. And
Like your book, come on now.
well, any kind of thoughts from my former players are going to mean a lot to me, because to me, that's why you get in there. This is a people business before it's anything, right? You're trying to build relationships lifelong, like getting to know you, right? Like a lifelong friendship. Like I think that's what this is about. I would hope one day that, there are many former players that look back and say that guy in some way changed me for the better. He gave me this piece of advice, or he was this sort of example that I got to watch, and I decided I needed to change or I needed to be better in this area. My hope is that I just positively affect people.
So to heck with what the biographer says. I want to know what that guy that I coached in the first year said, that guy that I coached in the fifth year said, and that guy I coached in my last year. What he said is more important than some author.
Because the author didn't get a firsthand look at what I do and how I do it.
Yep.
Those kids for, some of them for 5 years, if they're in the program as an eighth grader, they get to see you on a daily basis. But the thing is, they get to see you as a family man. They get to see you as a teacher, and a coach. So they get to see, the all-encompassing version of you. And my hope is that those guys see me and they see somebody that's consistent every day, right? They see somebody that puts in the work with basketball, the way he puts in work with lessons and teaching, and the way he puts in work to try to be a good father and a good husband.
Because your kids are around the program all the time.
Yeah, they're never very far away. Speaking of, my daughter's at a basketball camp at Freeman right now, trying to get incorporated into the community and stuff like that. And I would never have it any other way. I want Katie and my girls to be involved in everything.